Let's go ahead and get started. We all know that it is the Labors of Hercules webinar this month for Leo, and we have a little bit different noise protocols this month than we normally have because I'm using a slightly different version of GoToMeeting. This is actually GoToMeeting where we all appear to be the attendees, where the other one that we normally use is GoToWebinar. There are no hands for you to raise here, and I would ask you to keep yourself on self-mute unless you want to speak. But please, whenever you have something to say, I'll do like I normally do. I'll pause between some paragraphs to see if you guys have anything you'd like to talk about relative to what we just talked about, or something that popped into your head. But at any time you want to speak, just please unmute yourself and say, "Hey, BL, I got a question." It's only the couple of us, so we don't have a problem with the telephone anymore. But Walter, if you'll help me, can you see, Walter? Can you see the microphones for Tiago and Victor? Walter, are you there?
Oh, yes, I am. And I can see that Tiago and Victor and myself and you all have our microphones in green, which looks like none of us are muted.
Okay, yeah, I can see that Tiago and Victor are self-muted, and I could see that you were a minute ago. But what I need you to be able to see is that it says a microphone versus a phone. So if you'll watch, when I get started, if you'll watch Walter to see if anybody else signs in, but that they do it using the phone instead of the microphone, so we can bring their attention to the fact that they need to click the mic and speakers. Okay?
Absolutely. I cannot see whether anybody else is muted or not, but I can see whether they're using the phone or the microphone, because I remember earlier when I could see that phone icon for Tiago.
Okay, great, great. Thank you. I really appreciate your helping me with this. Okay. Again, if you, another option is to type the little note down at the bottom if you want to, but since this is just a small informal gathering, like I said, you can unmute yourself and talk. Again, we always have to be aware that there's going to be just a slight delay between talking. And this, of course, is based on the book by Alice Bailey. And the book itself is a series of articles on each sign that she published in the Beacon magazine. I don't know if you guys have looked that carefully into it, but there were, and I don't know how many of them, I don't know, 16, 18 of the books were actually dictated to Alice Bailey by Master DK, but then there were several, 6 or 8, that she did on her own. And the Labors of Hercules was one of those. Of course, there's information in it that he provided to her, but he didn't specifically dictate that book as he did many of the other books. Okay, this is something we reiterate each time. I have little different versions of why we study the Hercules myth, but I think it's a good idea to remind us of them. There's just so many things that we learn from the Hercules myth. They're a synthetic picture of a disciple's work from the mental plane through the emotional plane and out into the physical plane of manifestation. It doesn't do any good to rise above those planes because your work is done physically. So you have to master them and have them work for you as opposed to you working for them. It's very slow work. carried out under great difficulties over an extremely long period of time. And as Master DK tells us, it's often done in blind ignorance of the forces that are released, the results that are achieved. But step by step, we're led along the path, and we learn self-knowledge and development in that process. Our character and nature are tested and tried until the qualities that characterize the form can be transmuted into those which reveal the soul. So the progress isn't just limited to disciples here. We all have the 12 signs in our chart, and we all work with them to some degree. We need to better understand the lesson that each sign confers, and Hercules' journey through these signs shows us that. We've finished the first 4 signs now, and they were preparatory in nature. In Aries, the soul took its mental sheath. It added the combinations of the mental substance so it could best express itself, and man became a thinking soul. In Taurus, the desire world and the means of feeling were developed, and man became a sentient soul. In Gemini, a vital energy body was constructed. This is the etheric body, bringing together the energies of the soul and matter, a living soul. The 2 poles were in rapport, and the etheric body created. And then in Cancer, the work of incarnation was completed. The fourfold nature was manifested. Man became a living actor on the physical plane. Cancer was, as we saw, the sign, the gate into incarnation. And now the next 4 signs, we're going to see that they're a struggle for achievement. The self-conscious individual, emerging out of the mass in Cancer, knows himself to be the individual in Leo. The potential Christ in Virgo. The aspirant endeavoring to balance the pairs of opposites in Libra, and the one who overcomes illusion in Scorpio. These are the 4 signs of crisis and stupendous endeavor. All the illumination, intuition, and soul power that the aspirant is capable of must be used to the utmost ability. These have their reflection, too, on the involutionary arc, and a similar sequence of unfoldment can be traced where the soul achieved the individuality in Leo, became the nurturer of ideas and of potential capacities in Virgo, swung violently from one extreme to another in Libra, and was subjected to the disciplining effect of illusion in the form in Scorpio. So that was when our job was to fall into matter and to learn as much as we could about matter. That was the involutionary arc. We are now, hopefully, working on the evolutionary, the return back to spirit. There were a lot of extra things in this particular labor, and one of them was the information that was given to us concerning the 5th sign, Leo. In it, Hercules performs one of his best-known labors, killing the Nemean Lion. But they also tell us that this isn't the same lion that he killed to get the skin that he always wore. That lion he killed before he began these actual tests of the labors, demonstrating that he was ready for testing. I don't know if you recall that, but that was the lion whose back he broke. This particular lion, the Nemean Lion, he strangled it. This is one of the most interesting labors numerically. In order to understand it thoroughly, we need to consider the number 5. An esotericist considers 5 to be the number of man. It's a divine Son of God, plus the lower fourfold nature: the mental body, the emotional body, the etheric body, and the physical body. In Leo, man becomes what is occultly called the 5-pointed star, the symbol of individualization. It's the human being who knows himself to be an individual and becomes aware of himself as the self. Awareness of I, me, mine. The Eastern ageless wisdom tells us that the number 5 is the most occult and that the most deeply significant of all numbers. It claims that the group of celestial and spiritual beings who took incarnation on earth manifested through the quaternary and thus brought into existence the human family. Let me see, where the 5th group of divine lives, and that they combined that within themselves. Therefore, the dual attributes of the universe, the spiritual and physical, they unified themselves in the 2 poles. In other words, this is as we see so often in the labors of Hercules, where Hercules is referred to as a man and a son of God. They are exoteric and esoteric, objective and subjective. Thus we have the number 10, regarded as the number of human perfection and completion, the number of a perfectly developed and unfolded human being, and balance achieved between the spirit and matter. But number 10 is where spirit does not dominate matter, and the aspirant's objective is to subordinate matter to the uses of spirit, and therefore upset the balance of that perfect number 10. In order to raise matter into heaven, we have come into manifested existence. In essence and in reality, man is not what he appears to be. He is essentially what he will demonstrate in Aquarius, the opposite sign to Leo. He will then be the man with a universal consciousness in contradistinction to the self-assertive individuality of the Leo type. The individual in Leo becomes the initiate in Capricorn and demonstrates as the complete man in Aquarius. This has only been possible because of the boundless devotion to a dimly sensed soul that guided him until full self-consciousness has been achieved. We know it's there, we know it's inherent, and we search for it until we find it. The appropriateness and the relation of the 5th commandment to the 5th labor and the 5th sign thus becomes apparent. Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long in the land where the Lord thy God giveth thee. For in Leo, father spirit and mother matter meet in the individual, and their union produces the conscious entity which we call the soul or the self. Just as this is a sign where man recognizes himself as the individual and begins the cycle of experience to acquire knowledge, it is also the sign where the self-conscious man begins his training for initiation and where we have the last tests on the probationary path. When the labor of this sign ends, definite training for initiation in Capricorn is begun. And one last thing before I leave these little sidelines. Leo, the constellation, has 95 stars, indicating 9 times 10 plus 5. 9 is the number of initiation, 10 is the number of human perfection, and 5 is the number of man. And thus, in this constellation, we have the story of man, the personality, the initiate, and his ultimate spiritual achievement. Okay, anybody have any comments or questions or want to talk about what I just read? Okay.
BL, I didn't see any change on my screen. Was I supposed to?
No,
Okay.
I didn't have a slide for the little sideline.
Okay, no problem.
Now you should see a change in your screen. Okay, as with all of his labors, the presiding one shows up right at the get-go. The great presiding one sat within the council chamber of the Lord and discussed the plan of God for all the sons of men who are the Son of God. The teacher stood at his right hand and listened, and Hercules rested from his labors. The great presiding one watched the tired warrior rest and watched his thoughts. He said then to the teacher who stood close to his hand, "The time for a dread labor now draws near. This man, who is a son of man and yet a son of God, must be prepared. Let him look well unto the weapons that he owns, and let him burnish bright his shield, and dip his arrows in a lethal brew, for dire and dread is the labor just ahead. Let him prepare." But Hercules, resting from his labor, wot not the trial which lay just ahead. He felt his courage strong. He rested from his labors, and time again, past the fourth gate, he chased the sacred doe clear to the temple of the Lord. Time came wherein the timid hind knew well the hunter who pursued her, and gently came at his command. Thus time and time again he placed the doe upon his heart and sought the temple of the Lord, and thus he rested. Before the fifth great gate stood Hercules, armed to the teeth with all the gifts of war and warriors, and as he stood, the watching gods marked his firm step, his eager eye, his ready hand. But deep within his heart he was questioning. "What do I here?" he said. "What is the test, and wherefore do I seek to pass this gate?" And speaking thus he waited, listening for a voice. "What do I here, O teacher of my life, armed, as you see, with the full panoply of war? What do I here?" "A call has sounded forth, O Hercules, a call of deep distress. Your outer ears have not responded to that call, and yet the inner ear knows well the need, for it hath heard a voice, aye, many voices, telling you of need and urging you to venture forth. The people of Nemea seek your aid. They are in deep distress. Word of your prowess has gone forth. They seek that you should kill the lion that devastates their land, taking its toll of men." "Is that the savage sound I hear?" asked Hercules. "Is it the roaring of a lion I hear upon the evening air?" The teacher said, "Go, seek the lion which ravages the land lying upon the further side of the fifth gate. The people of this ravaged land live silently behind locked doors. Forth to their task they venture not, nor till their land, nor sow. From north to south, from east to west, the lion prowls and growls, seizes all who cross his path. His shocking roar is heard throughout the night, and all are trembling behind locked doors. What will you do, O Hercules? What will you do?" Sorry about that. Needed some water there. Okay. And Hercules responded to the need. Near the gate guarding Nemea, he dropped the excess of his weapons that he had with him, keeping only his club cut by his own hand and his bow and arrows. The people asked Hercules where his arms and strong defensive weapons were. Hi, Eva.
Hi, I'm so sorry I'm late. I had a hard time getting on, but I'm here.
Okay, good. Glad to have you. Okay, the people asked Hercules where his arms and strong defensive weapons were, and he replied that they loaded him down, retarded his speed, and hindered his departure. He told them all he needed was his stalwart club, can't even talk today, and his stout heart. From place to place, Hercules sought the lion. He found most of the people were hiding behind locked doors, except a few who needed to venture out for some reason. They greeted Hercules with joy at first, and with questioning later, as they saw the manner of his travel: no arms, small knowledge of the way of lions, and naught save a frail wooden club. Hercules pursued his way, afraid yet unafraid, alone yet not alone. For on the trail he followed, others stood, and followed him with hope and fearful tremblings. For days and several nights he searched and listened for the lion's roar. Suddenly he saw the lion. Upon the edge of a deep thicket of young trees it stood. The lion roared, and the Nemeans fled. Hercules stood still. He grasped his bow and arrows and planted an arrow in the shoulder of the lion. Straight to the mark it flew, but failed to pierce the shoulder of the lion. Again and yet again he shot the lion until his arrows were all gone. Then the lion came towards him, untouched, unscathed, and fierce with rage. Throwing his bow upon the ground, Hercules rushed the lion, and suddenly the lion turned and rushed ahead of Hercules into a thicket on the rocky side of the sharp mountain way. And so the two went on. And suddenly, as he traveled on the way, the lion disappeared on him. Hercules searched everywhere, grasping that trusty club. Then he found a cave, and from within the cave he heard the roar of the lion. So he entered the cave and passed throughout its darkened length, but found no lion, only another opening in the cave that led into the light of day. Did we get somebody else?
I don't see anybody else.
No, I heard a
beep?
yeah. Oh well.
Probably just one of us with our microphone open.
Okay. Where were we? He entered the cave. It was dark. Found no lion. But then he found another opening. And as he stood, he heard the lion behind him. Wondering what to do next, Hercules decided to block both ends of the cave, and he shut both himself and the lion within. And then he turned and faced the lion. With his two hands he grasped the lion, holding it close and choking it. Feebler and feebler grew the roars of hate and fear. Weaker and weaker grew the enemy of man. Lower and lower sank the lion, yet Hercules held on. And thus he killed the lion with his two hands, with his arms and his own great strength. He killed the lion and stripped its skin, showing it to the people as he exited the cave. The people of Nemea celebrated the death of the lion and returned to their land and lives. And thus Hercules triumphed. He laid the lion skin beneath the feet of the teacher and gained permission to wear the skin in place of that he already wore. The deed is done. The people now stand free. There is no fear. The lion is dead. With my own hands I strangled thus the lion and slaughtered it. Again, O Hercules, you slew a lion. Again you strangled him. The lion and serpents must be slain again and once again. Well done, my son. Go rest in peace with those you have released from the fear. Labor the fifth is over, and I go to tell the great presiding one, who sitteth waiting in the council chamber of the Lord. Rest thou in peace. And from the council chamber came the voice, I know. So, that was the myth. Anybody have any comments on what happened in the myth, or how it happened, or?
Well, I think there's lots that can be said in interpreting the myth, but I think that some of the other slides go into that. But I think one quick comment about the very beginning is I appreciate the reference to the fourth gate and the sacred doe, which of course is the Cancer labor, and how it was clear that that labor had been effectively mastered before proceeding to the fifth gate of Leo.
Right. I like the way, and that's why I keep showing it over and over again, the relationship between the, where was it? You know, the distinction between the first four signs, the distinction between the next five signs. But yeah, in the Cancer labor at the end of that, he was told he had to do that over and over again. And so it was fitting that that was something he was thinking about, that he had done it over and over again to the point where he had actually tamed the doe. Because these are not just, you know, pass the test and move on. These are things we have to demonstrate repeatedly. So thank you, Walter, for adding that. Okay.
Can I add something too?
Sure.
You may have covered this at the beginning, but this particular labor is the quintessence of Hercules. If anyone knows nothing about Hercules, they will come across somewhere that he is noted for his ability to kill the lion with his bare hands. This is the one and only labor that is so stands out and is so much associated with Hercules that it is very worth understanding and knowing the whys of it. You know, we can always go into the thought that this is the first one that shows us arising above the crowd, above the Cancer, everything up to this point, that from this point forward he is an individual, or we are individuals. But aside from all of that, this is a very, very important labor, because he really faces the fear, and he faces the lion, you know, face to face. And I guess it's a message to all of us to overcome our fears and to face our, you know, the things that we fear most face to face.
Right. And I did mention before you came on that, you know, this is his most famous labor,
Right.
but that this is the second lion that he killed. And they made reference to that in the passage that I just read, and also to the serpent. Because remember, as a baby in his crib, he killed a serpent.
Right.
So, you know, he was known prior to this particular labor for breaking the other lion's back, and that was the lion skin that he always wore until this particular labor, which of course is his most famous and his most dangerous. And it says in here that he's now replacing the skin that he used to wear with this particular lion skin. So, very good points. Thank you very much, Eva. Anybody else want to say something before we move on? So we saw, as Walter was just pointing out, that after the relatively simple and non-dangerous labor in cancer, Hercules now has to face the dangerous lion. This is Hercules, the aspirant, the soul that is symbolized with this lion, who is a prince and a king and a ruler. And because of this, he symbolically wore the lion's skin. The lion stands essentially for the coordinated, dominated personality, a highly evolved individual. This is what Eva was just telling us. With the triple aspect of the lower personal self fused and blended, and the potent beyond the average, the aspirant often becomes a difficult person. This is a sign of evolvement, that the person becomes difficult. He has a mind and he's using it. His emotions are controlled or else are so blended with his mental reactions that they are unusually powerful. So he is exceedingly individual, often very aggressive, self-confident, and self-satisfied. And his personality can be a devastating force in the family group, society, or any organization that he is affiliated with. The aspirant has to slay the lion of his personality. Having emerged out of the mass and developed that individuality, he then has to slay what he has created. Selfishness, the self-protecting instinct, it has to give place to unselfishness. He has to subordinate the lower self to the whole. Any comments on that before we move to the next slide? That's pretty much what Eva was just talking about. So what is the lesson learned by the fact that Hercules tracked that lion to the cave? Many of these old stories have baffled philosophers for thousands of years, and it is only in this day and generation that the true esoteric meaning can emerge, because humanity has now reached a stage of development where they're capable of understanding it. They have always been manifestations of the sun gods. And this labor of Hercules has again and again been enacted by a few other individuals here and there. Every nation has produced highly evolved aspirants who track the lion of the personality down and into the cave and there master it. But in relation to the myriads of human units, they have constituted a very small minority up until this time. But now we have a world full of aspirants. The coming generation in all nations will produce thousands of disciples, and already tens of thousands are seeking the way. People are now very individual. The world is full of personalities, and the time has come when the lion of the personal self has to be dealt with and the cave entered. In the symbolism of the scriptures of the world, the most momentous happenings are enacted in one of two places, in the cave or on a mountain. The Christ is born in the cave. The personality is overcome in the cave. The voice of the Lord is heard in the cave. The Christ consciousness is nurtured in the cave of the heart. But after the cave experience, the mountain of transfiguration is climbed, and the mountain of crucifixion is achieved. So, any comments before we move on?
Just that I appreciate the summary of all the caves. I hadn't actually put it all together quite like that. That was very good.
I'd like to take credit for that, but of course that was, verbatim pretty much from the book. It's interesting the way different labors, he will bring up different things. This is also like reading esoteric astrology. And actually, I keep saying him. It's not DK who dictated these. It was Alice Bailey who wrote this particular one. But DK does the same thing in esoteric astrology. You'll be reading through the Cancer section, and all of a sudden he's talking about all of the water signs in there, or the cardinal cross or something. So there's wonderful information scattered throughout all of these books. And it's really a joy to be able to find them and, like you said, Eva, to put the correlations together.
Right.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead. Is that you, Victor?
Yes. The cave, I heard you say the cave of the heart, but in the different trials, if you have a cave, does that always mean the heart, or is there something else?
In most of the connotations I've seen, it is the cave in the heart. It doesn't necessarily mean there might not be others, but that's where you actually nurture the Christ child in you. That's where the soul is kept hidden until such time as it begins to manifest. The soul is a the meeting the group and the soul expression and everything is first the heart, and then that evolves into the heart and the head, actually. So
The symbolism, however, for for cave, yes, it's heart, but not always heart. It could represent, for example, a womb, an area where nurturing does take place and growth does take place. But always the idea of a cave sets up for us the imagery of something that is contained, has contained walls within it, that forms a womb of some kind. Like the heart is in fact like a cave. It's got its borders and it's got an area for something to expand and to grow, much like a cave. So yeah, I would also expand the thought of a cave also being the womb in some places.
right, and it's also a dark and scary place.
Mm-hmm.
It's both nurturing, the womb, but it's also a dark and scary place where you have to confront something.
Mm-hmm.
I would add that this cave is a little bit unique or different from some other caves in that it has two entrances, and it's more like a tube going through something, and it's showing here how the personality that's being pursued is wily and can't really be captured until you actually block off both entrances and stay in like the heart with just your club or your higher self to actually nail it down and overcome it.
Right, and she doesn't go into the details very much about why there are in fact two entrances, but piggybacking off of what you just said, Walter, I think of it as the soul direction coming from above and the personality direction coming from below, and they both have to meet in the middle in that cave, and then one comes out dominant.
Mm-hmm.
So we saw through the journey that that previous lessons equipped Hercules. Did you want to say something? Is that you, Tiago?
Yeah, it was me. And if I show from what I'm thinking about this, when Hercules tried to use his bow to throw arrows, and the lion he didn't catch it, so he had to bring the lion to a cave. But I was thinking a little different about this aspect of the text. sometimes you see yourself and observe your ego, and your ego is very smart, and of course you try to sorry, to fool you. So sometimes you have to face it directly. So Hercules took the lion to a cave. So when you look to your ego, you have to face it directly. So you sit and meditate, and you cannot talk with it, but you have to face it, because the truth is that you always live with it and you nurture it. So when I look to what Hercules did, I see that what he did is to face, to use his courage to face the lion, and you have to do this with your ego. So it's this labor is all about this to me. I don't know if I did explain myself correctly.
Okay, you were breaking up a little bit, but I think I understood most of what you said. You were talking about the bravery and the courage, which are things that are associated with Leo, where this labor was done, in facing with his ego or his soul, in facing that personality that he had developed. And I think what I heard you say early on was that the arrows didn't work for him. He couldn't do this long distance. He had to do this personally, up front, in your face, with his own hands, confront this personality that he created.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. That's very good. That's a very good point. This is, of course, about the courage, and it's a gift of the sign.
That's the enemy. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
You have to face the enemy directly.
To face the animal that he had created.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, right. Good point.
So
Thank you.
I'm not so distant from the actual meaning.
No, you're understanding it perfectly. That was a very good point.
I'd like to add something to what Walter picked up on, and that was the two openings, the two entrances.
Mm-hmm.
It made me think that, see, with having two entrances, and this is in the labor, how that lion escaped. You know, he escaped several times, and it's very easy for the personality to run away, to escape from having to face itself, having to face his higher self. So by closing off one side, you know, see, there isn't that way of leaving and escaping.
You're
so
right.
It just made me think of that.
Yep, that's a very good point. Thank you. Okay, so we covered it in a little different terms, but I think we covered everything on this slide. He became identified with the real spiritual identity and overcame his personality. All right. So, a summary of the first 5 labors is covering the entire period of the path of probation, and killing the Nemean Lion is the climax of that particular part of the struggle. And now he's ready to tread the path of discipleship, in which the indwelling Christ is gradually revealed. Matter is steadily subordinated to the uses of the soul, and the form aspect comes to be regarded simply as the mother of the Christ child. So, if we look at the sign itself, it's a fire sign, along with Aries and Sagittarius. The sensitivity leads to individual awareness and self-assertion. Its polar opposite is Aquarius, which is an air sign that's about group awareness and world service. One of the things that he has to learn to do eventually is balance and then fuse that Leo-Aquarian axis. The rulers of Leo are exoterically the sun and esoterically the sun. Also, hierarchically, the sun. It's the only sign that has the sun at all three levels as the ruler, although we are told that the sun exoterically is the physical sun, esoterically it's the heart of the sun, veiling Neptune, and hierarchically it's the central spiritual sun, veiling Uranus. The key words for Leo from the form angle: let other forms exist, I am because I am. And from the soul angle, I am that, and that am I. Okay. What are the fire signs? Well, exoterically, fire is animated, it's enthusiastic energy, but it could be too forceful. Esoterically, the keys are burning by fire and reorientation. Aries clears the way for the spirit and for universality. Leo clears the way for the soul and self-consciousness, and Sagittarius clears the way for the body and one-pointedness. Fire signs are masculine, as are the air signs. That's yang energy. It's outgoing, it's expressive and giving. They represent day and are related to the 1357 ray line. They are compatible with air signs. They work out the issues of the axes relationships, and they do that through trines and sextiles that are favorable aspects. I've got a thunderstorm going on around me. I hope it doesn't mean I'm going to get cut off. The fixed signs. Leo is one of the 4 fixed signs. Exoterically, they are steadfast, stubborn, and determined, but that means they could be too inflexible. They work out their issues via oppositions and squares, which are commonly referred to as hard aspects. The school of hard knocks. Esoterically, activity involves soul development and control. Taurus is developing the soul light. Leo is developing self-mastery. Scorpio is resolving conflicts and duality and overcoming desire and illusion. And Aquarius is developing group awareness and world service. The synthesized axes eventually work out with Taurus and Scorpio using the wisdom of the light of the soul to overcome desire through right thought and action. And Leo, self-mastery leading to group awareness and selfless world service. The sign Leo is one of the 4 arms of the fixed cross in the heavens, the cross on which the cosmic Christ and the individual Christ are crucified. Another way to look at it is that in the unfoldment of the Christ consciousness in the form, stage by stage, various aspects of the divine nature are seen as being sacrificed. In Taurus, the symbol of creative force expressing itself through desire, we see the lower aspect of the divine creative force transmuted into or sacrificed to its higher aspect. It had to be raised up into heaven. In Leo, we see the cosmic mind working out of the individual as the lower reasoning mind. and this lower aspect has likewise to be sacrificed, and the little mind of man must be subordinated to the universal mind. In Scorpio, which is the third arm of the fixed cross, we find cosmic love or cosmic attraction. There it is shown in its lower aspect, and this we call the great illusion. And in Scorpio, we see the aspirant upon the cross sacrificing illusion to reality. In Aquarius, we have the light of the universal consciousness irradiating the human being, and bringing about the sacrifice of the lower aspect to the higher, and of the individual unit to the great sum total. Questions on that before we move on? Okay, as we talked about earlier, we had the 4 prep signs. We're now into the 4 set that are the physical plane struggle, with the self-consciousness and individualism emerging in Leo. And then we'll finally get to the 4 signs of achievement of Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces in a few more months. Another thing that's included that I didn't do a slide for, but it's included in this particular labor, is the information that the zodiac consisted of only 10 constellations at first. Well, at one point early on. And that the 2 constellations, Leo and Virgo, were one symbol. And perhaps the mystery of the Sphinx is connected with this. For in the Sphinx, we have the lion with the woman's head, which could be Leo and Virgo. That relates the kingly soul to the matter or mother aspect. So it could signify 2 polarities, masculine and feminine, positive and negative. In this constellation is the exceedingly bright star, which was one of the 4 royal stars in the heaven. That's Regulus, the ruler, the lawgiver, holding in its significance the thought that man can now be a law unto himself, for he has that within him, which is the king or the ruler. Hidden in the constellation is also a vivid group of stars called the sickle. It's the only way I can tell it in the night sky is to see that sickle, or a backward question mark. To the ancient initiates who saw all the external constellations as personifications of forces and as symbols of unfolding drama vaster than even they could understand, the constellation conveyed 3 major thoughts. First, that man was the ruler, the king, God incarnate, an individual Son of God. Second, the man was governed by law, the law of nature, the law that he made for himself, and the spiritual law to which he will eventually subordinate himself. And third, the work of an individual is to ply the sickle and to cut out or cut down that which hinders the application of spiritual law, and so hinders the flowering forth of the soul. So, that's all I have on Leo. Do any of you guys have any other comments or observations or questions?
I would just add that Leo is the 5th sign, and Leo conveys the 5th ray.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Another interesting part about the Leo Hercules labor is at the beginning how where Hercules was told to arm himself, but very quickly he dropped the armor and weapons that he had, which seems to be related to, since this is a struggle with the personality, that you're dropping most of your personality assets or things that have been developed, since it's a struggle with the personality itself. And he kept his bow, but as Tiago mentioned, the arrows didn't work, and so finally he had to wrestle with the lion itself.
Good point. You have to, the personality builds up all these things, and those have to be dropped by the wayside, which this pointed out, as you said, and then face it head on.
Yeah, the armor and weapons weigh us down just as the personality weighs us down after a certain point, at least when running amok and untamed.
And I don't know how familiar you guys are with stars, but Regulus that I was just talking about a minute ago, that's actually the heart of the lion. Those kind of things fascinate me. The stars and the history that they have with them, and it's considered a beneficial star associated with generosity and ambition. So any other comments? I really appreciate you guys being here. It was a small group, but it was a good group. We had some good discussions, and I hope you guys enjoyed it.
Yes, thank you very much. This was very well done.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, BL.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll see you in the next webinar about the labor of
Okay,
Hercules.
there it is right there, 31 August, the Virgo one.
Okay.
Thank you. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.